60 Minutes did a story in which they interviewed some very credible former Pentagon and military officials who had video and eyewitness accounts of unidentified flying objects that fly 13,000 miles per hour, drop 80,000 feet in less than a second, go underwater. Jimmy Kimmel said the government calls them unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP, which is just like the Cardi B song. I feel like if this story had been on 60 Minutes in like 1988, it would have been the only thing we talked about for the next 30 years. It would have been the biggest news story of the year. Now it's like, oh yeah, I heard that. I also heard Bill Gates was trying to get freaky with one of his employees, right? Kimmel. And they've known about it for a couple years, but waited until now to talk about it? Because I guess a couple years ago, they would have been too embarrassed if the alien said, take us to your leader. They'd be like, oh, that's not a great idea. Trevor, all right, hold up. The Navy's had UFO sightings every day for 2 years. 2 years these aliens have been popping in and out, popping in, but not doing anything. This is the most passive-aggressive alien invasion ever. Trevor, by the way, if any of you aliens have been watching us recently, you do realize this is not how we normally roll, right? I just want to clarify a few things for you aliens. Humans don't usually wear masks, okay? We don't usually just talk to each other over the computer, and we don't usually scratch our butts and then sniff it to make sure it smells like butt. I know we actually do that, but I don't want us to look bad to aliens. Robert Smigel spoke to the AV Club. AV Club was like, while at SNL, you wrote a lot of songs for Adam Sandler, including the Thanksgiving song. That's who I have to blame for this. All right, Robert Smigel. Thanks a lot. Smigel said, well, I've written a lot of different things with Sandler, but two of the songs I've written with Sandler are two of his most filthy songs. One is a pretty famous one called At a Medium Pace. I actually kind of like that one. I gotta admit, that's pretty funny, that one, which is from his first album, I think. I didn't write any lyrics, but I had the idea. There was an old corny country music song called Lay Down Beside Me. And I said, what if you do a song like that, but then it gets into a very specific, depraved request, but he's still singing it tenderly. Sandler just went off and wrote the whole song, which I would not have been capable of doing because I had a girlfriend and I didn't live in that world at that time. And then he had an idea for a song, which is a really funny idea about a guy who's married to a sex worker. It's a very reverential song about how proud he is of being her husband because the title of the song is She Comes Home to Me. I wrote it like a Sinatra song, and it's all these examples of this thing the woman does for a living, but he's so proud that he gets to call her his wife. He's the one that gets to go antiquing with her. She has sex with hundreds of men, but they never get to enjoy her homemade vegetable soup. It's bragging about all these sweet romantic husband and wife connections, and it's great. It's funny, and he got to do it on Chris Rock's show, and it's a great performance. He got a big band, and it's hilarious. Smigel said, I used to write jingles at SNL all the time, was sort of guilty of starting something in SNL, which has the whole trend toward if there was a recurring character, they had a theme song. I don't know how many reruns you watch of old SNL, but, you know, with characters like Pat, I didn't write that, but after a couple of years, everybody was doing that. You'd have a character, and the character would get a jingle written about them for montage, and I started that. You know, it started funny to me, but then it became this reflex move that everybody did, and I think people started being annoyed by it. Now, I'm writing a musical with Sandler. Oh, please. This will give me so much content. Please write a musical with Adam Sandler. I cannot wait for this. I don't know how much I'm allowed to talk about it, but it's going to be a Netflix animated movie. Oh, no, I want a Broadway musical with Adam Sandler. I don't want a stupid Netflix cartoon. And I wrote all these songs for it. It's very silly. It's for the kids, but hopefully everybody will find it funny. AV Club, you've worked with Sandler for a long time now. You're practically a lifer at Happy Madison. Smigel, I got to see him audition for SNL at a comedy club in Chicago with Chris Rock on the same night. Chris was chosen during that trip, and he was very exciting, but Adam was somebody I just bonded with very quickly. With other people, it's about comedy and some aspect of our personalities. Like Conan and I like to look at people through the lens of, we're both a little alienated in a way, where we like that sort of detached, turning people into cartoons kind of thing. Sandler and I bonded in a completely different way. Maybe it's because we're both from Jewish families that were very close-knit. So we sort of had a lot in common that way and laughed at the same kind of human things. It was sort of a genesis, but Adam's incredibly silly and nonsensical. He's very underrated just as a writer. I'd like to say he's my best friend in show business, but it's almost a farce because there are probably literally 15 people who feel the same way. He's just given me so much support, and he's had a really positive impact on my life personally as well as professionally. Cinemablend is getting in on the Bob's Burgers conspiracy. If you're new to this podcast, I'm going to ask you two questions, okay? I want you to think about these questions. First question. Have you ever seen Bob's Burgers? The answer, of course, is no. But then think about this second question. Have you ever met someone who has seen Bob's Burgers? Now, interestingly, the answer to that is also no. I am convinced this is somebody's getting paid to make Fox think that Bob's Burgers is a show that airs on Fox. But even the people who run Fox don't watch Fox on Sunday nights because they're watching football on NBC. So they don't even realize that Bob's Burgers isn't on. They put it on the guide and they promote it, but the show doesn't exist. Have you ever seen it? No. Have you ever met anyone who's seen it? No. Cinemablend wrote, Bob's Burgers, what to watch if you like the animated comedy. All right, I'll play. Bob's Burgers, the show about the Belcher family. While each of the characters has their own interesting stories and quirky character traits, they still somehow all come together to form something of a beautiful show. Today, we take a look at shows like Bob's Burgers, from some animated classics like South Park all the way to more recent shows such as BoJack Horseman. If you like Bob's Burgers, they recommend Central Park, which is on Apple TV+, writing, I had to put this as the first option on the list because it's literally created by the same people who allegedly have made Bob's Burgers. Central Park, an Apple TV+ musical comedy, revolves around a family living in Central Park who must face off against a greedy land developer who wants to turn Central Park into more apartments and commercial spaces for her own profit. I have Apple TV+. I'm going to see if this exists, Central Park, by the Bob's Burgers creators, or if they're also conning Apple. I will get back to you on that. Central Park supposedly stars Josh Gad from Frozen and Daveed Diggs from Hamilton. Doesn't that sound a little fishy to you? What's going on? Cinemablend recommends a regular show on HBO Max. The series is about Rigby, who's a raccoon, and Mordecai, a blue jay, and their common daily lives as friends while working as groundskeepers at a park, spending most of their days trying to avoid work and have fun instead. The jokes are some of the funniest for a show that was on a children's channel prior to becoming popular with adult audiences. And some of the storylines are genuinely interesting and so much fun. That sounds like a good time. South Park on HBO Max. I'm going to imagine that you have heard of South Park by now. It's been on for 24 seasons, and you listen to a podcast called Daily Comedy News, so I'm going to move on. Family Guy on Hulu. Same comment, been on for a million years. BoJack Horseman. People love BoJack Horseman. This popular show follows an alternate world where humans and anthropomorphic animals live side by side, taking place in Hollywood, because the D was stolen, and centers on BoJack Horseman, who's a washed-up star who wants to return to relevance once his autobiography is written. For fans of Bob's Burgers, the heartfelt moments will hit you the hardest. There are some dark moments that really hit you and make you think about life in a certain way, connecting with the viewer on another level, just as there are moments in Bob's Burgers that get to you. What is going on? Why is everyone pretending Bob's Burgers is a thing? This list includes The Simpsons. If you don't know what that is, then this is the final episode of the podcast. If anybody right now is like, what's The Simpsons? I don't know what that is. For Bob's Burgers fans, this is literally the blueprint for all adult animated TV shows. Do you love the Belcher family? You'll love the Simpsons family. What else on this list? Futurama, Rick and Morty, Big Mouth, Archer. About Archer, they said, there's something about Archer that reminds me of Bob's Burgers, even though it's not remotely the same. It's possibly the comedy that comes from its 8 main characters, or it could be the interesting animation choices that are made, or the heartfelt lessons that are learned occasionally. Either way, I find myself rewatching Archer often. I think it's worth a shot if you love Bob's Burgers. The Guardian wrote about Nish Kumar saying, hide your commemorative Brexit coins. Here comes Nish Kumar, scourge of the sensible rights, pirate chief of the woke left, swinging in fresh from a morning spent toppling statues, hexing conservative politicians, rolling up Union Jack flags, and smoking them like giant cartoon cigars. Kidding. The real Nish Kumar is boyish and bearded, a 35-year-old comedian who likes to loaf around in an Adidas tracksuit and slip on Simpsons trainers, who leans left in his politics, and who, in keeping with a million British comics before him, enjoys making jokes at the expense of the governments of the day. When Kumar looks in the mirror, he tells The Guardian he sees a well-to-do, fundamentally harmless British Asian man. He barely recognizes the dangerous lefty ghoul who gets criticized in the right-wing press and lambasted on social media as a bigot, a hater, someone who's anti-British, and who pours scorn on Britain's achievements. That was one heck of a paragraph, Guardian writer. Great job. Kumar says, it's baffling. The Guardian hooks up us Yanks. They write, to explain a little bit about his recent history for those who are unfamiliar with Kumar's adventures in the culture wars, Yanks, When he was presenter of The MASH Report, a comedy program which broadcast on BBC Two from 2017 to 2020, he earned an outsized reputation among right-wing commentators. Despite the fact that his program broadcast to modest audiences, Kumar and his co-stars were felt to be too mean about conservative voters. Exemplars of bias in the BBC schedules, The Telegraph began to keep a tally, and the paper noted soberly there were as many as 11 anti-Tory jokes in a single episode. Andrew Neil called the MASH Report unchallenged left-wing propaganda. Boy, I hope these guys don't watch the U.S. late-night shows. They'll lose their minds. After a bad gig in 2019, during which his material fell flat with a pro-Brexit audience — this is a stand-up show, not the TV show — there were gleeful write-ups in the Mail, the Express, and elsewhere. When Kumar contributed to an online video made by the children's program Horrible Histories, the 2-minute clip amounted to a lighthearted interrogation of patriotic cliches aimed to 7 to 12-year-olds. It was treated as borderline treason by nominal adults, condemned by at least 2 Tory MPs. Kumar was like, it was a comedy show that at most 1 million people watched. I think they were looking for any excuse to whack the BBC, and for a while, I was that excuse. He's got another theory, and he's like, you want to believe they just hate you because of the jokes you're making, but sometimes you got to be smarter than that. Why have I become a lightning rod? Why am I their boogeyman? For a moment, he's content to keep the question hanging. If you're like me, a brown, middle-class, cisgendered man, there's like a group of people who are angry at you for one reason, whereas the weird and creepy stuff, even before you get into threats of violence, female comedians have to put up with, that's something else. Any trans person of any prominence is constantly threatened. I say this to put my own experiences in perspective. Other people have it worse. I get the promises of violence through things like Twitter, but I just support it and move on. There's a point at which you wouldn't do anything else. If you took it more seriously, you'd have to become a full-time threat of violence administrator. Nobody has a God-given right to be on television. Well, apart from maybe David Attenborough and Oprah. Those two do. And that's your comedy news for today. Follow the show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. See you tomorrow.